How you doing, guys? Today we're going to reinstall the refurbished transmission for the little mule, my 857. Just dragged it up out of the basement, put it here on the floor. I gotta go get the floor jack to help me get it into place and ultimately bolt it in. But one of the questions I've gotten, or a couple of the questions I got, is how did I get a late model 8-speed transmission into basically a mid-60 short frame? And overall, it's fairly simple, and I'm going to show you how I did that through this video. Obviously, number one, I have a late model 8-speed transmission. This is actually out of a late 80s 416. This is actually an 857, 1967 857. And when it comes to the tractor itself, there's only really two modifications I made to the 857 in order to get this transmission in. Now I have a plug right here, and that was the long dipstick fill tube for the 416. Obviously, with my battery being in the back, as well as this being the short frame or the mid-60s tractor, really it's not needed, because number one, who checks their transmission oil unless there's a leak, number one. Number two, you can always fill it through the shifter hole, which is what I typically do. There's no need to, there's no need to do anything else other than that. There is a fill or a drain here on the side. It's completely useless. Number one, the oil line, once it's fully full, is above that, so you can't use it to add. And as an inspection window, if you're inspecting the oil and through that, you got bigger problems than inspecting the oil. So I basically just take that plug, seal it up with some Teflon tape or some gray RTV, and screw it in tight. There is the drain plug on the bottom. I got that in place and tightened down, so it's ready for fluid. I don't have the fluid in it as of yet, but for modification purposes, there's really only two. In the sheet metal, I just cut a hole for that plug. I probably could have used a flush mount plug and didn't need to actually cut the hole, but I did. This was like the first time I ever put a 8-speed in a mid-60s tractor. So that hole is optional. You just, instead of running a plug that high, you just get a plug, ram it in tight enough down, and then flush cut it. That's what I did on the 1056 when I put the 8-speed in this one. So the actual back half of this one doesn't have that hole. The second hole that you need to make is right there. And that's for the high-low arm. I just made a little notch in the sheet metal in order to get the 8-speed arm, or the high-low arm, from the 8-speed through. That obviously travels and comes up in this area right here. Now this is optional. I've seen people just totally delete this plate. This is the original, I guess, shifter cover for the 857. Also, there's one here on the 1056. That's how they came originally. Some people just leave it open with the sticks coming up through that hole. I don't know. I just like it more finished off. So I just made a pattern and cut a slot in the original cover, and the high-low arm will stick up through this slot. I'll show you on my 1056 here. Okay, the high-low arm sticks through the slot, and then obviously your shifter will just go right where it typically would go. You can use the original 416 shifter, or you can use the 3-speed shifter from the 857 if you want it to look a little bit more original. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this thing on the jack, on my floor jack, and I'm going to get it jacked up enough where I can line it up to the 4 bolt holes here on the main plate. They correspond to the front of the transmission case right there, these holes right there. And I'm going to remove those bolts because they go right here. So essentially what I'm going to have done in the next, hopefully 15-20 minutes, is I'll have that transmission at least physically bolted back in the tractor. With the transmission just bolted back into place, I have the four bolts on the frame plate on the inside here. Those have been installed. The 2 bolts up here on the top have been installed. I've torqued them to 30 foot-pounds, so that should hold the transmission in place. Now, there is a couple little things that I did to this tractor in order to just kind of, I don't know, just to dial it in, so to speak. With this particular transmission, there's a little ledge here, and it doesn't go. Where can I show it to you? I don't know if I can. Yeah, you can't see. I should have shown you without the transmission being on, but the casting kind of stops right here. Where's my finger? There it is. It kind of stops right there, and that causes this sheet metal to twist a little bit when you tighten it down. So I just put a couple old automotive body shims right here, just 2 of them, and that just takes up the gap. So when I tighten it down, the sheet metal fits down nice and tight on the transmission. Also, the other thing I did, which it's kind of funny, but this cable sheath right here, okay, it would move back and forth when you actuated the arm because this particular transmission didn't pinch it in place. But if you notice right there, there's a little shiny thing sticking up. That's a nail. I just took a finishing nail and slipped it in there and then tightened it down. And what that does is that actually tightens the sheath up so it doesn't slide backwards or forwards when you use the lift arm. Now, I know in general that's kind of might appear to be a little hokey, but at the end of the day, it does the trick. Nobody knows unless nobody's ever known. I mean, unless I showed you just now. Now, the only thing that's kind of a difficult situation is installing the high-low arm. There is a roll pin that needs to be installed in the arm. It's tight, trying to get it in there, trying to get it straight so you don't destroy everything. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to put that high-low arm back in place, and hopefully it goes okay. All right, so I started to install this arm, and it's a real bear. And this is really where you learn that these early tractors, these mid-60s tractors, weren't designed to have an 8-speed transmission in them. This is really the only issue I've ever had with installing one of these. To get it going, I take the, obviously this is the high-low stick. I start the roll pin into the arm. And now this is where it gets kind of tricky because you got to kind of drop this thing in here and line up the roll pin in such a way that it's, I guess, visually in line in your mind. So let me just get that on the arm here. Or, I mean, on the stud. Come on, baby. You can do it. All right, so there it is. So basically, you got to get this thing into place. Let's pretend that it's lined up, okay? And then I got to take a hammer like this one and gingerly tap that roll pin in so it goes through the arm, through the shaft, through the transmission, and back through the arm on the other side. Now this roll pin's a little bit long. I really should go get a shorter one, but just so we can get this done today, we're going to roll with this roll pin. So I'm going to continue to fight with this until I get it lined up and put that roll pin back in, and I'll be right back. With the high-low stick in place, the roll pin completely seated. What a nightmare. My punch chipped a little bit, and luckily I had my safety goggles on, and it chipped up into my face, and then the little chunk went down. Now, I didn't hear it go into the transmission because, of course, you know, I had the shifter hole open, but I looked around for the little chunk. I can't find it. I turned the transmission over, looked as best I could with a flashlight. I don't see anything. So it must have fell on the floor here somewhere because I didn't hear any kind of dinky sound like it hit metal or something. But threw the punch away and moving on. I'm going to go ahead and fill it up with 80W90 gear oil. The only reason why I'm using Lucas is because it was on sale at AutoZone. So I'm just going to crack the thing, put the oil in there, and then put the shifter in and put the cover plate back on. I'm just going to do all that right now because with the cover plate out of the way, it's just easier to get the oil into the transmission. Everything's all sealed up. Everything's ready to go. The gear oil has been poured in. I got the main shifter. I have the high-low shifter in. The balls are on. The cover plate is in place. I made sure that it's adjusted so when you actuate the arm, it doesn't hit the doesn't hit anywhere. So it moves nice and smooth. The shifter actually shifts real nice. This is third reverse. So let me just turn the shaft a little bit. There it goes. It's in reverse. So I mean, everything feels real nice and smooth. So I'm real happy with that. I turned the differential with the gear oil in it. Everything's smooth right out. Any little bit of that gear noise just went absolutely away. So I'm all set there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to install the pulleys, the brake shaft pulley and the input shaft pulley. And I've done that before on other videos, so I'm just going to go ahead and install that right now. With a little bit of this and a little bit of that, everything's all back together. Have the brake drum back in place. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on that 3/8 bolt. We shake it back and forth. There's no gear clash. There's no in and out play because of the shim, so we're all set there. The input pulley has been put in place, obviously, as in my previous videos. I do have my little speedy sleeve and my homemade Woodruff key in place, so you can take the 3/4 inch pulley, put it on the 5/8 shaft. The belt's in place, so that all looks really good. It's fairly aligned, so I'm happy with that. Next up is to just kind of do the final button up. Put the belt guard on, which we will do. We'll get the belt guard back on it. We'll get the hubs back on it. We'll get the tires. Put the tires back on it. We'll get it off the jack stands. Put the seat on it. So we'll get this thing all bolted up and I'll roll it away from the wall. And with a little final assembly, everything is put back into place. The hubs, the tires, the seat pan, I got the hitch back on it. Everything's hooked up. It rolls real nice. I didn't start it up. It rolls real nice, and even rolling it, the rear end is perfectly quiet, where even when you were pushing it, you could hear everything kind of grinding, and I don't know, you could just tell that something was bad in there, and it was the outboard axle bearings. So that's basically how you get an 8-speed into one of these mid-60s tractors. It's really not a whole lot of specialty about it. Really the only thing that is kind of interesting is the brake band and how the brake will work in general. In this particular case, you can see I have that brake cable. I made a cable, and the reason for that is this particular 8-speed transmission has a brake band like this that pulls from the top. Typically these 60s tractors have a bar that pulls the brake band from the bottom. So if you want to run the mid-60s clutch setup, which you can see I do, you got to come up with some kind of concept in order to get that brake band into place. I made that cable years ago, and it's been on the little mule for at least 3 or 4 years, and it's absolutely fine. There's no chafing. The little guide I made is perfect. I mean, I have it set up loose like this because I like to have the ability to just kind of shift the tractor when it's kind of rolling. Not shift on the fly, more so just, I don't need to have it that tight. So that's the reason why I have it kind of loose like that. Other than that, this is pretty much a bolt-in situation. Like I showed you before, there's a little bit of a hog out in the back. Got to hog out a little spot right here for the high-low arm. Depending if you want to get involved with making the slot, you know, you can just not even put that plate back in. I did, only because I think it looks cleaner that way. But there you go. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, thank you for your support. I hope you found it kind of interesting. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this kind of content, small engines, transmissions, wheel horse tractors for that matter, please subscribe and ring the bell so that way you get notified when my videos go up. The Senior will be coming back into the fold. It's just been really cold outside, so I haven't been able to work on it a whole lot. But that project is still moving forward. And as always, have a great day.